Hi and welcome to my 7th video in the series to do with the nervous system, and this one's looking at the brain. So this diagram shows an image of some neurons within the brain. The green ones show the ones that are firing and the red ones show the ones which are not. So what happens whenever you learn a new task or you do something new, so for instance the first time that you begin writing, what happens is the neurons that control that movement fire and connect with one another, and that can be shown in this diagram here. So the ones in green show the neurons, let's say for instance you writing, are firing. Now the first time that you do something, what essentially happens is those neurons connect for the first time, and then slowly but surely as you practice more and as you get better at writing, that neuron pathway gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and hence why you get better at things like writing. Now this is true for any new skill that you learn, so it could be juggling, could be kicking a ball, could be learning to do mental arithmetic. Now the neurons in the brain that control those different actions will connect up, and the more that you practice something, the stronger those connections will be. So for instance, if you were a novice to golf, the first time that you swing a golf club, the neurons that control the muscles in your arm that can swing the golf club, they will make a connection. But if we were to compare that to someone who's a professional, then the neuron pathway that controls their muscles is very, very strong. So essentially the more you practice, the stronger the neuron pathway gets. And the converse is true. The less that you practice, the more that this neuron pathway actually breaks down and becomes less strong, and hence why you can't perform the action as well as you could have done if you'd have practiced more often. So this works in two respects. The more that you practice, the stronger it gets. The less you practice, the weaker it gets. Now within the different parts of the brain you have several different sections, and they control several different things. So essentially you can look at the brain, or if you looked at our brain compared with other organisms, then our brain, if you compare it to our body size, is very, very large, and it has a really big surface area. Generally speaking, you can think of all of the essential things, controlling things like heart rate, controlling things like breathing, being nearer the centre of the brain, and more complex things, so dealing with things like logic or thinking or learning new skills, is towards the outside of the brain. And that's why the brain actually has these pits and folds in it. What those increases the surface area, and if you looked at other brains in comparison, we have a huge surface area on the surface of our brain, and hence we have loads of areas for these neurons to connect up. So one of the things about the human brain is it has billions and billions of these neurons, and they can connect up in a variety of ways. Because we've got so many neurons, it means that there are so many different connections that you can make, and it would appear that the volume of things that we can actually learn is almost limitless, because these neurons can connect up in different ways, which means we're hugely adaptable and what we can learn a huge amount. There are some interesting areas of study looking at brain development, particularly in adolescents and young children. It's believed that if certain neuron pathways are not developed by a certain age, then those neuron pathways can't then be developed in adulthood or adolescence. A good example of this is with feral children, so children that have grown up in the wild without human contact. It's been shown that when these children have been found, that they cannot develop language or certain speech patterns, and this is down to the fact that these pathways haven't developed in early life, and hence why they can't develop them in later life. So anytime that you learn anything new, you'll have a new pathway being laid down, so a new skill that you've never done before, whether this is a sporting skill like a new sport that you've tried, tennis or snooker or billiards or something to that effect. Then what will happen is the muscles, or the neurons that control those muscles, will fire and form new pathways. Okay, so in summary, whenever you learn a new skill, then a new neuron pathway will be formed. So for instance, if it's the first time you ever played golf or swung a golf club, the neuron pathway, or the neurons that control that muscular movement, will connect up. And like any skill, the more that you practice, the stronger this neuron pathway will get, and also the less that you practice, the weaker it will get. Because the brain has so many neurons in it, it means that you can make a near infinite number of different types of connections, and so you can learn a multitude of different skills. It has been established, however, that if you haven't learnt certain or haven't made certain neuron pathways by a certain age, that they then won't be developed in later life. An example of this is with speech in feral children.